Hey, good afternoon. It's Pastor Brian. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And it's Pastor Joe. It's so great to have you join us today on the After Service podcast. I'm really excited about the direction we're going to be talking about in the next couple of months. And we're starting a new kind of a new thing today. But you've had a great week?
Yeah, well, it's just barely started. Because we talk about the weather. For some reason, I don't know what this is. When people ask me how I'm doing, I immediately go to the weather. And I think because it's safe. But starting either tomorrow or Thursday, we have like a 8 or 9 day span of 70 plus degrees sunny.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'm so excited for that. Shorts and short sleeves, just...
Summer's starting.
Yeah, of course it is skeeter time, so we just have to, for me, because I'm a mosquito,
Really?
Oh, mosquitoes love me.
Yeah.
When we go to Texas, right, by the way, it looks like I'm dropping a lot of frames, so hopefully our quality is okay online. If anybody...
Somebody put some notes in the comments saying that there's audio or visual problems.
Somebody has already done that?
Please do.
Oh, please do. Okay.
Please do.
Yeah.
Pull up Facebook on my computer here.
Sure. Well, while you're doing that, when we go to Texas, my in-laws love it when I hang out outside with them because all the mosquitoes come to me and leave them alone. So I'll hang out outside for maybe 2 minutes, and then I'm like, nope, I'm done with this. So, yeah, Brian's just going to... How's it looking?
Maybe. Might be fine.
Okay, well, let me try something, hopefully.
Loading, so it's hard to tell.
Okay.
But I don't think anything's dropping. So,
Okay. All right, well, anyway, so, yeah, mosquitoes. Let's move on. Let's talk about what this kind of, let's call it the season that we're entering on the podcast. I'm excited about it, and I'm glad that it's something you brought forward. So I'll pitch it back to you to explain what we're going to be doing.
I can do it by telling the story. So last fall, in November, as we were going through some of the elections and other kinds of political stuff going on, and as I was noticing, obviously we all know this is the presidential election year. And I was just reflecting on how divisive and hot that topic is in the church, that, it's easier for many of us to talk about Jesus with people than it is to talk about politics. It's just so hot. And my initial concern was, how do I help my church not get ripped apart in 2024? And that just kind of led me to thinking, I looked at some seminary classes and a variety of other things and going, we need to think more carefully and thoughtfully about how do we as Christians interact politically. And I don't mean right or left, and that's what we're going to get into in a moment, but just how do we think about this whole topic? And I think we are discipled, underdeveloped in our thinking on this topic, and I certainly am right with it. And there's historical reasons for that. But the point is this is something I think we need to grow in. I brought this up to my leaders, what was it, last week? 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah.
One of the questions was, why would you do a podcast series on politics? And the thought behind it was like, why would you bring up something so divisive, so controversial? Is it really worth it? And part of that is the assumption behind it. So that gives me a sense of why we're going to do this. Do you want to take it from there?
Oh, not necessarily. I mean, there's like so many places to go, but we have. You found a book.
I found a book called Political Gospel. I don't know if people can read that. Political Gospel by Patrick Schreiner. a public witness in a politically crazy world. And what I love about this is, as he says, even in his introduction, and that's maybe where we can start going, what this book is not. This is not a book, and this podcast will be as well. This is not an argument for one party over another. There's no secret agenda to encourage people to be progressive or conservative. It's not a manual for various policies. It's thinking it through. How do we as Christians, how does the church relate to civil government is maybe even a better way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And culture.
It reminds me a little bit of Preston Sprinkle's approach, if some folks are familiar with him as an author. In the way that he will approach some thorny topics. One was whether Christians should have the okay to kill other people, and that was the whole topic. And it's like, whoa! But just a very thoughtful, apolitical, and I say apolitical, but we'll talk about what that even means as we go forward. But it's like, it's not the idea that it's an apologetic primer for how you approach people on certain topics. Like, oh, we're going to talk about that topic. Okay, well, here's where you should stand. There's like no dictation.
Right.
And I think that's important, because I think a lot of times well, you know me, I live in the gray. My goal. Right. I want to understand things. There's not black and white there. And I want to understand things. So, because I want to have a confidence, if I'm going to have a very specific position, I want to have a confidence in why I have that position. And I don't want somebody to tell me what it should be, because I'm stubborn. So I appreciate this. I think the author uses the term, this is intended to be a framework to work from. It's not, this is what you should think. It's, well, how should we approach certain topics, and not even the specific topics, but how should we just kind of approach engaging with people when we live in a world where we have all this divisiveness and tension and abrasive interactions,
Yeah. And I mentioned it, and it's, and I just kind of did it in passing, but maybe I do need to say it. Part of the problem in modern Christianity, particularly in the West, is historically we've never had to really think this issue through. We've never had to, because the way the history of the Christian church is, up until about AD 300, we were not part of politics at all. We were just this underground kind of a movement. But then starting at AD 30, the state be just wholly adopted almost by force for everybody Christian. And so that started what historians call Christendom. And from that point all the way up until the 1900s or so, everybody assumed that to be a part of the Western nation, you were a Christian. To be a politician was a Christian. And so there was just an assumption about how Christians in government work that's not necessarily biblical. It's more historically just kind of
mandated,
right? And so we're moving back into a life and time where, our government isn't necessarily a Christian government, which is a good thing in some ways, because it's forcing us to think through some of our theological fundamental ways we look at what is the church and how does it relate to civil government, and how are we supposed to relate to culture, because up until that point we never had to think about that stuff, but now we really do.
Right.
And that's what this book is going to help us try and think through. And just as an aside, if I may also say, there's some of the basic ideas in this book. I've thought that for decades. But at the same time, there's some nuances here and some living out of that idea that I'm very much in learning mode here too. So I'm looking forward to learning on this topic.
I agree. I know that I bring in, my own, garbage when I come in, and I look forward to being convicted. One of the things that I am challenged with is I'm judgy about, I make assumptions about how people work in the world, and I'm hoping that I can adjust the way that I look at things to be more open to conversation, to different perspectives. When I tell you that I live in the gray, I do, and I also make assumptions about people. So topics, I'm gray. People, black and white sometimes. It's not awesome.
And I know you have to say, I think that's true for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we're looking in the book. We're starting with the preface and introduction. That's it today, if we even get that far. Yeah.
Right.
So
we haven't even talked about how we're going to go through this. So I just thought, looking at the introduction, just start in the preface is, is there some thoughts on these first couple of pages that you went, oh yeah, that's really what we need to think through.
Well, I think the first assumption that somebody might make is that Christianity is and politics should be separate, and that. Well, first of all, the guy who wrote it is from Portland, which I think is remarkable, right? Isn't that wonderful? He starts talking about the Hawthorne District, some things that we see, maybe not on a daily basis, but on a regular basis. It's part of the culture that we here in the Northwest live in. So it's accessible in that regard.
Yeah.
But he does come back and say, Christianity is political, but it's not partisan.
Well, and he defined what he means by political, and I think that is a helpful term. He called think of politics as just how does we as a society organize and decide to live together.
Right. Yeah. So there's a section within the introduction called Politics Defined. So the definition. Political simply means, as I'm quoting here, the activities associated with the organization and governance of people, right? As we kind of pile in together as people, the closer we live together, the more politics in this sense are important, because we have all these people living on top and close. And, if you live out by yourself in the middle of nowhere, you don't necessarily aren't looking for the state, let's say, or government or whatever organization to help you live with your neighbor, because your neighbor is 5 miles away. Mm-hmm. But when you live on top of each other, that framework becomes more important. So, when he's talking about politics, he's talking about how do we live with each other? What's the framework that needs to be in place for us to live with each other?
And just that one single move, that redefining what it is, rather than right, left, or American politics, or whatever it is, but how do we live with each other? You can already go, oh, there is things that Christianity has to say about that. Our faith does have to very much say about that issue. And so, yes, that alone was just that alone is probably just about worth the price of the book. Just that one idea.
Right. Well, if we look at Politics Defined, and I'm going to quote from him again, he says, first, you might be thinking I'm speaking about a partisanship, because people equate political with being partisan. And that's immediately where I go. Oh, we're talking politics. So are you right? Are you progressive? Are you conservative? Is there a litmus test for you being at my church based on the way, on partisan values, right? And that's not what he's talking about.